Good morning, everyone. We're continuing with our money magnetism class. I flashed this cover of this book, which is useless to you because it doesn't look anything like this. But anyway, this is the book, Swami Kriyananda's book on money magnetism. And I think we're going to be talking about this for a long time. It's a subject worth talking about, not merely because money is so important, but because of the consciousness and the attitudes that are related to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dearest friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Guide us in our thinking and in our feeling and in our actions, that we may glide through this world on the wings of thy grace. Show us that this life on this plane of consciousness on this planet need not be one of confusion or suffering or dullness, but you are always here with us. The opportunity for joy, for love, for kindness, it's right there within our hearts. Guide us, awaken us. Show us the way from darkness to light, that we may live as your instruments in all that we do. Om, peace. Amen. So yesterday, we talked about magnetism. And I'm not sure to the extent I emphasize, but I guess I will today when I talk about energy, how much our attitude creates our magnetism, because magnetism is the whole field of consciousness in which we move. I was thinking about this, a very funny and silly incident that happened with Swami Kriyananda. A group of us were I believe we were in Carmel, and there was this gentleman with us or visiting with us. We just try to get the whole picture clear. Yeah, we were down in Carmel. I'm trying to figure out why this other man was with us. His name was Rohit Singh. I'm talking about something that happened maybe 30 years ago. He was the son of a woman named Mrs. Mohini Singh, who was the cultural attaché to the San Francisco Indian consulate. And Swami became friends with her. She was a lovely person. And many of us became friends with her family. And she had this extremely handsome son, tall, over 6 feet tall, very elegant. He was a Sikh, I believe, and so yes, of course, they were Singh. So he wore a turban all the time. He was a very striking man, and to a certain extent was quite aware of what a handsome, strong, and striking man he was. I do not know how this began, but somehow or another, as a young man, he was very proud of his physique and his physicality and so on. And I presume Swami wanted to enlighten him about other possibilities. So somehow or another, Swami is on the floor with this man and they're leg wrestling, where you lie on your back and you put your legs up like this and you try to knock your legs down. This is the Swami Kriyananda many of you never saw. Even at that point, he had arthritic hips. I'm really not quite sure what this was about. But Swami would have been into his 50s, well into his 50s. Let me think. This would have been in the mid-70s that this happened. So he was much stronger than Swami. And so he was on the floor with Swamiji, and he was so scornful and embarrassed that he, such a big, strong man, was going to be wrestling with this 50-year-old man, and he was just hoping that he didn't break his leg because he was so strong. But of course, time after time, Swami just defeated him. He couldn't get over Swamiji. And this man was like, a foot, almost a foot taller than Swami. It was just like, it was really funny. And then somehow it became a contest to see if anybody could defeat Swami. And Vidura, who was also strong and athletic at that time, Vidura had been out for a run, or somehow Vidura was going to be the champion. He was going to be the champion, and he emerges from his room in his little running outfit, which was this little singlet with his little skinny arms showing, and his little shorts, and he comes out like the big hero, and he lies on the floor, and Swami goes whomp like that, just not even, like, not a second. Somehow or another, it turned into arm wrestling. And for some idiotic reason, I thought I would try, because I was pretty strong. I was in my 20s. I could move 100-pound boxes of potatoes around the kitchen. I thought I was pretty strong. Swami just sort of looks at me like, you're actually really sitting across from me? You really think you're going to try to do this? And I just was so naive. Yes, I'm going to try to do this. And I put my arm up with Swami. And this is the point I want to make. I never felt any physical force. I was absolutely defeated by the power of his magnetism. And it wasn't like he cowed me with that magnetism. It's like before the force of his will manifested as physical energy, I was completely crushed. It was really interesting to me, which is, I'm sure why the whole thing happened, that I realized how much of what we think of as physical force is not physical force at all. It's a movement of energy that then manifests as physical force, but it's the movement of energy that causes the material world to react. Now, that's a very important point, because this whole subject that we're talking about is money, but money is a training ground for a whole lot of other things. And this is where, in the whole first chapter of this book, Swami tries to explain to us that money is a flow of energy. And the rules that relate to money are not physical rules. They're the rules of the flow of energy. So yesterday I was talking about magnetism. Magnetism is created by the entire flow of our consciousness. I mean, I talked a lot about how dynamic and positive Swami's magnetism was, because his attitude toward us was so serviceful, so loving, so optimistic about our chances, for God realization. And his optimism about my destiny was probably the single most important vibration that he put out to me. He believed in me. Much later, many years later, from the 70s, in 2003, when I was working very hard to write Swami Kriyananda as we have known him, I worked for several years without ever getting anywhere at all. I had some bad karma that I had to pay off, and I paid it off during those years of just confusion and wrong attitude, all sorts of things. At a certain point, Swami said to me, very strategically, actually, there were two things that happened. First, he said to me, "This doesn't look like it's going to work. Why don't you quit?" Which was, he didn't really want me to quit, but he wanted to challenge me to see what I would say. And it was very interesting, because he said, "Why don't you quit?" And then I said back to him, "No, I have something to say." And it was like, wow, where did that come from? Where did that conviction that I really had something to do here, when Swami was actually giving me the opposite? But I realized that it was his constant belief that I could do it, that even when he repudiated that belief, I fought for myself. That was a beginning turning point. Then the other turning point was when I realized that I was the only person in my circle of friends, including Swami, who thought I couldn't write this book. And it occurred to me, that was when I really realized that Swami had always believed in me, and always believed that I would get it right. No matter how many times I proved him wrong, he constantly reaffirmed, not by saying, "You can do it, kid." It was nothing like that. It was just, it was much deeper than what you put out with words. It was his actual perception. And it wasn't unique to me. I want to add that. He just believed we all could do it. And that was it was a sweet thing that he had. He would call us great souls. Good morning, great souls, he would say. Good night, great souls. To what do I owe the honor of the visit from these great souls? And so he would just say it in a way that was almost humorous, but not quite. Lighthearted might be the way. And that, over a long period of time, it went very deep. It went very deep. And so finally I had to say, why am I clinging to this attitude of weakness when Swamiji, who's much wiser than I in every way, does not see me in that way? That was the magnetism that Swamiji put out. And he didn't fake it, and it wasn't an affirmation. It was a deeply held belief with him. Now, this is important because we're now talking about energy and attitude and magnetism. Affirmation is a very powerful tool for developing the right magnetism and having the right flow of energy. But an affirmation that we know is just an affirmation, and that even as we say it, we just know that we're affirming something that we don't really believe, actually, instead of strengthening us, actually weakens us. Because every time we assert it with the conscious mind, the subconscious mind puts up a block against it. And what we're really trying to do with affirmations, above all, is we're trying to integrate another flow of life, integrate another flow of energy. So Swamiji's calling us great souls, Swamiji believing that I was going to be able to succeed at a task I didn't believe I could succeed at, it wasn't an affirmation. It was a perception of reality. So when we're working with our magnetism about money, it can't just be, oh, I've got this affirmation. I have all the wealth in the universe. All the wealth in the universe belongs to me. It belongs to me, all the wealth in the universe. It can't just be like we're reading words off of a page. It has to be that we have really come to understand why this is true. So in this little tiny book at the beginning, Swami just makes the simple statement that money is a flow of energy. Money is not something you hoard, not something you gather. I had the goofiest experience. It was a throwback to God knows what incarnation. I don't know where it came from. I've always had a very, I won't even say, I have never been preoccupied with money. I came from a comfortable family, to be very frank and clear about it. All the time that I was living on no money, I could always have gone home to my parents. So it wasn't like I was really ever in a position of hazard. It was just, there was always security behind me. And I say that very respectfully, because I know people who didn't have that. And then they were entirely dependent on themselves, and their confidence in the flow of abundance was more hard won than mine was. I had confidence in that flow, but I wasn't hanging over a precipice like some people in the world are hanging over a precipice. But in any case, I was sitting right in this chair where I'm sitting right now, where I often sit for programs. And just a few feet away from me, for many of you have been in the house I live in, but those who haven't, there's an indoor closet that actually goes back under a stairwell. So it's one of those sort of narrow, deep closets that has a corner. So it's very, you can go in there, and there's a lot of places you can go into that closet. I had this sudden, very strong desire to have that closet be filled with gold coins, with bullion. Maybe there was some jewels and crowns. And it's just like, I really wanted to have a room full of wealth that I could walk into, that I could touch, that I could hold, that I could see. It was a completely, like, who knows where such a thought came from. Of course, in other times, when Swami Kriyananda was King Henry, and he was the son of William, and there were 3 sons, and Henry was the youngest son, and the crown was not given to him at the beginning, but eventually it came to him. And when the man who was holding the crown was accidentally killed in a hunting accident, Henry got on his horse and galloped to the capital to take possession of the treasury, because he needed to get possession of those rooms full of wealth. And when he had possession of it, that also assured that he would be crowned. Now, it was righteous that he should be crowned, but having control of the treasury also gave him that power. So, I mean, these are like memories that we have of this idea of physical wealth. But so we translate it. Now we don't have rooms full of gold that we can go in and stand in and touch like this. We have little numbers, on pieces of paper, and we open our computer screens. But we transfer that same idea. I'm safe, I'm secure, because this number is really big. And if this number gets really, really small, then I'm not secure anymore. And what Swami is profoundly and deeply trying to tell us in the first few pages of this book is that the very concept that when we hoard money, we are wealthier, he says, it in itself is contrary to the magnetism we need to be able to attract money. If money is energy, and if this universe is an energy universe, and this is not even Vedanta anymore, this is just simple science, that everything that we see around us that looks so fixed, that we think of as just some heavy item that it will take another physical thing to move, is actually really just a field of energy. And I was starting to say this yesterday. What is it that changes energy? It's, other energy, other magnetism applied to it. There's another element here, that this is why you have to go way out into the Vedanta world. In the Material Success course that Swami wrote, it starts with this very high-level philosophy. And he actually asked me once, because he was wanting to transfer that course from India to America, if there was, if there was a way to edit it a little bit so that it didn't assume so much commitment to the Vedanta philosophy. I worked on it with him for a while, but I don't think any of it was ever acted upon. But for those of us who are trying to operate the world of money from the spiritual realm, one of the things we have to understand is that there's 3 fundamental levels of reality. And matter, which appears to us to be the most solid, or I was going to say, appears to us to be the foundation, is actually the last level of manifestation. It begins with thought, it goes into energy, and finally it materializes. So money is just a particular form of energy. It begins with thought, we apply energy, and then the money comes to us. So if we're hoarding money, if we're collecting it and we're made secure by looking at it, what thought form is attached to that? The thought form is that I depend on material things for my strength and my security. The thought form is that money is a finite quantity, and I have to make sure that I have enough of it so that it will last, or that I can have it for what I want, like this. All of it is, my happiness depends on these external circumstances. So from the point of view of being a devotee, if we weren't talking about money, and we were just saying, my happiness depends on my accumulating a certain amount of fixed energy and then holding on to it because that's what I need to feel secure and happy. If it was pomegranate seeds or office furniture or automobiles, we would be a little suspicious of that thought, wouldn't we? But when it's those little numbers on our little bank account, somehow that feels different to us. But what Swami's trying to get us to understand is it's not different. And he's also talking about that money is a flow of energy. We exert a magnetic force, and then that magnetic force draws energy to us, just like the energization exercises when I was talking about it yesterday. We exert our willpower, We direct energy, and then we generate a flow of energy. But if we're just accumulating that and not using it, not being dynamic with it, okay, so now the other aspect of energy and the other aspect of the way the energy universe works, having to do with attitude and ideas, is what is the purpose of our life here? So now we'll go to a very big view of this. Why are we born? What is considered success in life? Now, in our materialistic world, right now, in this planet at this stage, having lots of money just inherently means you are a success. But from the devotee's point of view, what is it that constitutes real success in this life? Why was I born? Well, I was born, if we're going to answer it from a devotee's point of view, I was born to realize God. I was born to be God's instrument in this world. I was born to know myself and all of creation as a manifestation of the divine. So how does that objective relate to storing up and hoarding lots of money? Maybe if it's not as extreme as filling my closet with gold, but it's still the same thought. I need this external thing in order to feel secure. And that's the question we have to ask ourselves. That's why Swami says this book is not about acquiring money. This is about developing the magnetism to attract money whenever you need it. It's the law of prosperity. In other words, that's what we're working with. So what is it? What are the laws of prosperity? Part of the laws of prosperity is generosity, is the ability to be able to use what we have in a way that is consistent with our higher values. Because that will develop the magnetism to be able to attract what we need. You know, let me just try to think this for just a minute. There was a point in my life when I really felt I needed another living situation, and I didn't have any money to get that better living situation. It just wasn't in my oh no, let me phrase it differently. I knew I had the perfect capacity to generate money if I needed to generate money, but in order to do so, I would have to step away from my responsibilities at Ananda. In other words, I would have to choose the necessity to acquire money over the opportunity to serve Master's work. And I knew I was perfectly capable of doing it, but I knew it wasn't Dharma for me to do that. It wasn't going to be the right thing. And it was very interesting for me because I just surrendered what I knew to be a real need. It was interesting. It was a real spiritual need to live more expansively. But I couldn't do it at the expense of my higher Dharma. But then a year later, I found myself, my living situation had completely changed. And I found myself exactly where I knew I needed to be. And I realized that what had attracted that to me was not that I thought, oh, in order to have a better living situation, I have to earn more money in order to buy what I need. What had attracted it to me is that I had held and continued to put out energy on the higher level, and that had created the magnetism that brought it to me. Now, that was a very, very personal, very specific incident in my own life, but it was also very vivid to me. So what we have to begin to understand is what kind of energy field am I creating with my attitudes? What kind of world am I creating? I remember I've shared with you an incident. This was about thought, but it was the same reality. I found myself in great need of divine comfort, and I found the divine comfort not forthcoming. And it was a peculiar situation, but I just felt that Divine Mother knew I needed her, and she just wasn't going to come. It was like she was like right outside the room, and she just wasn't going to come in. I was like a little kid crying in my bed, and I knew Mommy was out there, but no matter how I cried, she just wasn't going to come. And then I realized that there was a person in my life who needed compassion and kindness from me, but I didn't want to, I was not forthcoming. I was not forthcoming for all kinds of petty reasons, just petty reasons, but I was not forthcoming. And I suddenly realized that I had created a universe in which kindness and compassion were not available when needed. And so there I was in the need for it from a divine source. Divine Mother says, "Well, now you know what it feels like, don't you?" So I really changed my attitude toward that person. But I also see, you see, that's how it runs all the way. What do we think about abundance? What do we think about prosperity? Are we always afraid? Are we always thinking there's not enough? Are we always explaining to ourselves that we also have to be practical? And if I don't take care of myself, who's going to take care of me? I had a funny conversation with a friend. We were talking about both of us are of an age where we're closer to the end of our lives than to the beginning. I don't think we're teetering on the brink, but nonetheless, we're closer to the end than the beginning. So the concept of old age is often there. And she was talking about one of her aged relatives whose body had begun to fail, and then her mind was beginning to fail, and she was going to need, constant care. And my friend, just very casually, as if it was obvious, said, before I get to that stage, please remember to shoot me. And that's just sometimes what people say. I said, I've always felt differently than that. And maybe I'm just foolish. But my feeling is if my friends need my help at the end of their lives or whenever they need it, if my friends need my help, I'm going to give it to them. And I'm not going to resent having to do it. If someone becomes elderly and their mind begins to go and I'm the person who can take care of them. I mean, it's karma. It's not like it's my responsibility to take care of everyone I know. But there are people in my life who, if they found themselves without a caregiver, that caregiver would have to be me. There's just no question about it. And I would do it. I would adjust my life to do it because it's important. And so I was saying to her, so if that turns out to be me and you all have to take care of me, well, too bad. You're just going to have to do it. It's just the way it's going to be because this is the way the universe works. It's a flow of energy. And why would I be willing to put out energy, but all my friends would be too selfish to do it? I mean, what an insult to all of them. That, they're only in it for themselves, and all these years of friendship mean nothing if it's slightly inconvenient. See, these are the questions. These are the overall attitudes. What is the nature of the universe? When we started Ananda, and we were so impoverished, we actually thought that by this point we wouldn't be so impoverished. We're still a lot more impoverished than we thought we would be. It just we've accomplished a tremendous amount, but uh, it just hasn't. We're not wealthy. We're not in any way wealthy. Everybody still seems to be able to make it through, and we just keep finding a way to take care of each other. But very early on, like in our 20s or 30s, I remember we had a meeting. We were just going to say, like, what is going to happen when we all get old? How are we going to take care of ourselves? How is Ananda going to take care of us? And there was one person, it was Nitai, and he stood up at that meeting, and this is what he said. He said, Ananda doesn't owe me anything. He said, I didn't make a deal with some organization that I would help it and then it would help me. He said, I've given my life to God. And if at the end of my life, God wants me to live under a bridge, under a piece of cardboard, he said, that's what I'll do. And I was so inspired by that thought. Like, what are we actually doing here? Now, I'm really talking now to devotees. I'm not talking in a general way. But what is our fundamental value, and in what are we putting our faith? That's the question you have to ask, because that is your magnetism. You could have all kinds of ideas and you could try to fool God with all your affirmations, but what you really are inside yourself, what do you believe in? That was when I was faced with that real call to change my lifestyle to be more expansive. But my first duty was that I'd given my life to God and I was serving God through Ananda. And if that meant that I continued, I didn't have certain things even that I thought were needed, that was just too bad, because this was my primary value. So that's where we have to go. What do I really believe is the nature of the universe? How do I really feel that things happen in this universe? And what is the most important value for me? What am I really living by? because this is my magnetism. So let's leave it there for today. We'll talk more tomorrow.